I'm always afraid I'm going to forget to turn that on silent and someone's going to call. I'm like, it's going to happen one of these days. So, good to see everyone this morning, and pray for Brother Parks. He sent me a message last night and said he was under the weather, so he wasn't going to be here. And so appreciate y'all praying for my mother-in-law. She came over the house last night, and I said, you didn't even realize a week ago at this time you were preparing to go in the hospital. She said she didn't even realize on Sunday afternoon when she laid down for her nap she was preparing to go to the hospital. She said until Aaron showed up and said, we're going. But they got her on the straight and narrow, and she said she's going to live to 100, so everyone is invited to my mother-in-law's birthday party when she turns 100. That is in 2042. So, we got a few years. But we'll have everyone here is cordially invited to our 100-year birthday party, because that's what she told the doctor. She said, I'm living till I get to 100. If the rapture takes place and we're all gone, she's still here, Chris, you're in charge. But anyway, first, the book of 1 Samuel, chapter number 9. The book of 1 Samuel, chapter number 9. And we've been in this for a couple weeks, and actually, I want to get through this. I want to get through this chapter and the next chapter, so we can move on a little bit. But I do think we're just laying the groundwork here, because it is important. We started out looking at whenever Samuel was rejected from being king, when Samuel was rejected and Israel asked for a king. Samuel had been their prophet, he'd been their judge, and was doing a good job. And they come to him and said, hey, let me just get a water ready. Adriana said last week, she said, Dad, I almost come down from the sound system and brought you a cup of water. So we'll try and keep that from happening this week. But anyway, Samuel was rejected. They come to him and said, you're old, and your sons walk not in your ways. And both of those things were true. Even though Samuel did live for quite a while after he anoints Saul as king, but yet they come to him and said, you're old, and we discussed how that there was a lot of things they could have done, but that's not what they wanted to do. And it's interesting, sometimes we get single-sided, we get laser focused, and Brother Wayne, sometimes you're like, I'm going to Atlanta, and I'm going down I-75 South no matter what. Well, sometimes I-75 South is not the best way to go to Atlanta. Sometimes if I punch in, and I normally don't do it. I used to listen to WSB and listen to the traffic report, and I told y'all I would zone out for the weather report, so I never heard the weather report. But anyway, I would listen to the traffic report and just hear traffic. Well, now you got Apple Maps or Google Maps, whatever you got. It's right there on the display on your vehicle, and so you can punch it in, and it'll show you the time it takes, and sometimes it'll suggest different routes. And Brother Wayne, sometimes I know that 75 South is the fastest way, but sometimes there's a crash on the interstate. And I think I may have told y'all, but me and Levi, here, it's been several months back, Levi called me and said, hey, or texted me and said, hey, 75 South shut down, go a different way. So I come down through Calhoun, and I go down, and my GPS says go turn left, and it brings me out by Buc-ee's. And then I turn right at Buc-ee's and go get on. And I sat on the ramp for 3 hours. For 3 hours, I sat on the ramp because my GPS lied to me, which it does that. It does that on a pretty regular basis. But anyway, aside from that, a lot of times you can just look and it says, it shows red, and it'll show red for a long way. And I'm like, oh, there's a better route. But sometimes I'm just like, no, I'm going the way I want to go. And it'll cost me sometimes hours. If you deal with Atlanta traffic, you understand. Just one small wreck can cost you hours. And so, but here they said, the only thing you can do, Samuel, is give us a king. That's all we want. We want a king. We don't want to discuss your replacement. We don't want you to ask God what you want us to do. We don't want you to do any of that. We want you to simply give us a king. That's what we want. And Samuel goes to God, and God said, it wasn't you that they rejected me. And give them what they want. And so in chapter number 9, at the beginning of chapter number 9 is God is, and that's what we looked at last week, God is working it out, and God is going to show Samuel, and the interesting thing, I did say it last week, and I'll say it again this week, how that they still trusted Samuel. Again, it wasn't a full rejection of Samuel, it was what was going to happen in the future after Samuel was gone, and so they still trusted Samuel, and they basically, Samuel tells them, in verse number 22, and the Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice and make a king. And Samuel said unto the men of Israel, go every man unto his city. So they trusted Samuel to make the decision. And in turn, it almost appears like they trusted God to make this decision through Samuel. And so in the beginning of chapter number 9 is laying the groundwork for how God was going to work it out so that Samuel would know the king, and Saul would know, because Saul is going to be the first king of Israel, and that Saul would know that God chose him, because we're going to see when we read right here, we're going to see that Saul has I think it's a twofold problem. Sometimes you look at it and you're like, Saul was very humble, but I think not only was Saul humble, I think he was very insecure. And you see that later in his life. You see that later in his life whenever after David kills Goliath and the ladies are out there and they're saying Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Well, neither one of them was true. Neither one of them was true, but it bothered Saul that they were saying that because of his insecurity. And so we're going to see that Saul at the beginning was humble, but I also believe he was insecure. And so he was going to need God to show him. And some of us, and I'm gonna move this over to faith. Some of us, God shows us something through His Word, or through a man of God and the preaching of the Word of God. God shows us something, and some of us are more prone, and this is not necessarily me. Some of us are more prone just to believe God and do what He said. Other of us are like, okay, God, I think I heard you. And I think, but I just need to make sure. And we lay out a fleece. And I know laying out a fleece is not always a good thing, but that's what we do. And so some of us will lay out a fleece, and then we're like, okay, all right, I laid out the fleece, and you did it the way you said, but now just to make sure. And so here is Saul, and Saul is going to be, he's going to be the one that God is going to choose for them to be king. And so it starts out in the beginning of the chapter where he speaks about Saul's father, and that his father was, it says, a mighty man of power, but he was a man of wealth and substance and influence. And his donkeys have disappeared, and so his father says, hey, I need you to go search for these donkeys. And so Saul takes a servant, and they go on a journey, and they pass through different, in verse 4 it says they passed through Mount Ephraim, through the land of Shalisha, and they found him not there, and they passed through the land of Benjamin, and when they were come to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant that was with him, come and let us return, look at this, lest my father leave caring for the asses and take thought for us. And so here's Saul, and they go, and they're actually on a 3-day journey. They're on a 3-day journey as they're going through place to place looking for these donkeys. And they don't find them, and so they get up to this place, and the servant says, hey, there's a man of God in this city. We're right over here by this city, and there's a man of God in this city. And it appears, it doesn't just appear, Saul did not know who Samuel was. Now, he may have known the name Samuel, but we know he'd never seen him before. We know he didn't have a lot of experience with him because we're going to see it whenever we read it here in a minute. But whenever he sees him, he asks, hey, tell me where the seer's house is. And he has to tell him, I'm the seer. That's who I am. And so the servant says, hey, we should go ask him because he's an honorable man and all that he saith cometh surely to pass. And so they have a discussion amongst themselves and say, well, what do we have? We don't have anything to give. We've been on this journey. We've ate all the food. We don't have anything. And the servant had just a little bit of silver. And so they take that and they go and they take that money and they go and then they meet the young maidens and they tell them, yes, the prophet Samuel is in town and he is here. And so when you get to verse number 15, that's where we basically stopped last week. And I'm going to read a bunch and then we'll go back through it. Now, the Lord had told Samuel in his ear a day before Saul came, saying, tomorrow about this time I will send thee a man out of the land of Benjamin, and thou shalt anoint him to be captain over my people, that he may save my people out of the hand of the Philistines, for I have looked upon my people, because their cry is come unto me. And when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said unto him, behold, the man whom I spake to thee of, this same shall reign over my people. Then Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate and said, tell me, I pray thee, where the seer's house is. And Samuel answered Saul and said, I am the seer. Go up before me unto the high place, for ye shall eat with me today, and tomorrow I will let thee go, and will tell thee all that is in thine heart. And as for thine asses that were lost 3 days ago, set not thy mind on them, for they are found. And on whom is all the desire of Israel? Is it not on thee and on all thy father's house? Saul answered and said, am not I a Benjamite, of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin? Wherefore then speakest thou so to me? And Samuel took Saul and his servant and brought them into the parlor and made them sit in the chiefest place among them that were bidden, which were about 30 persons. And Samuel said unto the cook, bring the portion which I gave thee, of which I said unto thee, set it by thee. And the cook took up the shoulder and that which was upon it, and set it before Saul. And Samuel said, behold, that which is left, set it before thee, and eat. For unto this time hath it been kept for thee, since I said, I have invited the people. So Saul did eat with Samuel that day. And when they were come down from the high place into the city, Samuel communed with Saul upon the top of the house. And they arose early, and it came to pass about the spring of the day that Samuel called Saul to the top of the house, saying, up, that I may send thee away. And Saul arose, and they went out both of them, he and Samuel brought. And as they were going down to the end of the city, Samuel said to Saul, bid the servant pass on before us. And he passed on, but stand thou still a while, that I may show thee the word of God. Chapter 10. Then Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it upon his head and kissed him and said, is it not because the Lord hath anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance? When thou art departed from me today, then thou shalt find 2 men by Rachel's sepulchre in the border of Benjamin at Zelzah, and they will say unto thee, the asses which thou wentest to seek are found, and lo, thy father hath left the care of the asses and sorrows for you, saying, what shall I do for my son? Then shalt thou go on forward from thence, and thou shalt come to the plain of Tabor, and there shall meet thee 3 men going up to God to Bethel, one carrying 3 kids, another carrying 3 loaves of bread, and another carrying a bottle of wine. And they will salute thee, and give thee 2 loaves of bread, which thou shalt receive in their hands. And after that thou shalt come to the hill of God, where is the garrison of the Philistines. And it shall come to pass, when thou art come thither to the city, that thou shalt meet a company of prophets coming down from the high place with a psaltery and with a tabret and a pipe and a harp before them, and they shall prophesy. And the Spirit of the Lord will come upon thee, and thou shalt prophesy with them, and shalt be turned into another man. And let it be, when these signs are come unto thee, that thou do as occasion serve thee, for God is with thee. And thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down unto thee to offer burnt offerings, and to sacrifice sacrifices of peace offerings. 7 days shalt thou tarry till I come to thee, and show thee what thou shalt do. And it was so that when he had turned his back to go from Samuel, God gave him another heart. And all those signs came to pass that day. And when they came thither to the hill, behold, a company of prophets met him, and the Spirit of God came upon him, and he prophesied among them. And it came to pass, when all that knew him before saw that, behold, he prophesied among the prophets, then the people said one to another, what is this that is coming to the son of Kish? Is Saul also among the prophets? And one of the same place answered, said, but who is their father? Therefore it became a proverb, is Saul also among the prophets? And when he made an end of prophesying, he came to the high place. I'm going to stop reading right there. And so, again, here we have in the very first couple verses that I read, it says that the Lord told Samuel in his ear the day before. So the people had asked for a king. And Samuel said, go to your city. And so now Samuel is waiting to hear from God. And one of the things that makes Samuel great is the fact that, again, like I said, he took this very personal. Samuel not only did he take it personal whenever they asked for a king, he also is going to take it personal whenever God rejects Saul as king, and God has to tell him, basically get up and go anoint another king, someone who's going to be a man after my own heart. And so Samuel took this very personal. He was offended by what they had done. But yet, even though he was offended by what they had done, he was obedient to God. And I mean, I think about it in my own life. I mean, sometimes at work we have cameras. We have cameras on our vans at work. Well, I don't, but the other guys have cameras on their vans at work. And it started out, Brother Wayne, it was just a monitoring system. It just would tell them that we were speeding. It used to be just a thing. There was no camera. And then they started. They said we're not monitoring you. It's just for insurance purposes. Well, then they started sending emails to our managers, and then our managers getting on to us for us speeding. So we called it Operation Email. And so if you would speed up, Riley, and go so many miles an hour over the speed limit, it would send an email. And then if you slowed down, it would reset. Then if you sped up, it would do it again. So my boss didn't like it. So we decided one day, Paul, we were just going to load his email up. And so all the technicians on that day, every time they were driving their car, they would go past the speed limit, so it would send an email, and then it would slow it. And we absolutely filled his inbox up with these emails. And he's like, all right, I don't know who started that, but that's got to stop, and it's got to stop right now. But anyway, so now it's progressed. Now it's progressed to a camera, and it's like, all right, guys, well, the camera's there, but it's just for if there's an accident or something, because we're a commercial vehicle, and people sue companies and everything, and so just if there's an accident. Well, now it has progressed, Brother Wayne. So now if you're doing something bad, if you accelerate too fast, if you're speeding, if you're braking too fast, it beeps. Beep, 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 beep. And so it's monitoring them all the time, and it's driving the guys crazy. And this rebellious spirit wells up in them, and they really want to just take the thing out and just throw it. But anyway, you understand. But here is Samuel, and Samuel has been rejected by the children by the children of Israel, and they've rejected his sons, which they probably should have, but they've rejected him, and God said, no, it's not you, it's me, and yet he's still being obedient to God. And sometimes a true test of your obedience is not when everything is going exactly how it ought to go. That's easy. That's easy when it's just super smooth sailing. That's not the time to test your obedience. It's when things don't go the way they're supposed to. We were most of y'all are probably in here. We built a house. Me and Bub decided, we're going to go together. We're going to build a house. We're going to sell the house. And so we built this house. And Brother Wayne, I don't think you even knew this, but we built a house, and it's our first house, and we were really excited about it. And Aspen and Dakota and all them, they really helped us. And it was on the market for just a short time, and then went under contract. And like Tuesday was our closing date. This coming Tuesday was our closing date. And my realtor called me on Monday and said, I got some bad news. The man who signed the contract, who was under contract, has backed out, and he is not going to buy your house. Well, it just, you're like, what in the world? What, like we're this close. We're this close. And you can get upset, you can get bothered, but I mean, at the end of the day, Riley, you just say, God, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know why it worked out this way. I don't know why it worked out this way. Sometimes people lose their job. Sometimes people lose their job. They're rolling on. We know Brother Wayne's son was in a car accident, and I'm sure, Brother Wayne, you've asked God 1,000 times why. Why? And sometimes things happen, and that's when you find out, are you going to be obedient? It's not when it's smooth sailing. And so here is Saul, and Saul is now he's coming to Samuel, and instead of Samuel being like, this guy, really? Have you ever seen, like, sometimes we get we've had several new bosses at work, and if you have been the one like vying for that position, and then they bring someone in from outside, we're very judgmental, and you're like, this guy, and you just start nitpicking. Look at how he combs his hair. He can't even get his gig line straight, and this guy is supposed to be our leader, and you just get very judgmental, and that was not what Samuel was. That's not what Samuel was. That's not what he did. God said, hey, I've got a guy. And when he shows up to meet, whenever he shows up, Samuel is obedient to God. And Samuel continues to be, all the way to the end, obedient to God. Even though at times it hurts him and it wounds him, he's still obedient. But yet, we're going to see that Saul, this chapter, the next chapter that I read, and then chapter 11, are the glory days of Saul. Those are the glory days. And then after that, Riley, it's pretty much, it starts going downhill. And it goes downhill pretty fast. And that downhill is because he was not obedient. I believe in I'll just look at it real quick. I believe it's chapter 15. Chapter 15, here is Saul, and this was his second time of disobedience when he did not do what he was supposed to with the Amalekites. And in verse number 22, it said, and Samuel said, hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifice, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. And so here's Saul, and Saul is going to be given everything. But because of disobedience, he's going to lose everything. And so here's Samuel, and God tells him tomorrow, verse 16, tomorrow, about this time, there's going to be a man of Benjamin. And so in verse number 17, and it says, when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said unto him, behold the man. So here's Samuel, and Saul comes in, and he's head and shoulders. He's head and shoulders. We've already referenced that in verse number 2. It says that he was from his shoulders and upward. He was higher than the people, and so he was much taller than anyone else, and so he was a striking figure. But yet when he came and God said, right there he is, that's the one, and so Samuel is immediately knows who it is, but Saul doesn't know who Samuel is. And so it says in verse 19, then Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate and said, tell me, I pray thee, where's the seer's house? And so he's asking like, hey, I need to see the seer. And he's going to ask about the donkeys. That's what he's going to ask about. He's going to ask about the donkeys, and he's going to ask about what should we do, and he's going to ask about that stuff. And you think about this. Sam, Samuel at least had warning that God had a king picked out, and he knew who it was. Saul, when he woke up a few days before, whenever those donkeys went missing, he had no idea that his whole life was about to change. And even though apparently he was aware, we'll see in just a second, apparently he was aware that Israel was looking for a king and God was going to give them a king, even though he was aware, it never even crossed his mind that king might be me. It never even crossed his mind. And so he gets up and he follows what he thinks is the trail of those donkeys, and he ends up here, and it never even crosses his mind that God is working these things out on his behalf. And sometimes in our own life, God will work things out. And I was telling them a story back then. I was telling Brother Tyrone and Paul the story about how whenever I was when I was I probably would have been a teenager. I would have been a teenager, and how I ended up coming to Georgia, and I came down here, Brother Wayne, in it was March, and it was springtime, and the leaves were out, and I'm running around in shirt sleeves, and when I go back home to where I was from in Maryland, there was 3 foot of snow on the ground, and I'm like, I'm kind of done with this. I'm pretty much done with this. But I didn't realize how God had been working things out. He had worked things out in that direction, and how I ended up down here, and then I ended up, marrying down here, and now I've lived down here for next year will be 30 years. But I had no idea whenever I climbed in that Suburban in West Virginia that one day we ended up at the camp. We ended up at the camp doing something up at the camp. I had no idea, Brother Tyrone, that I would end up living within a few hundred feet of where I was at that moment. But God did. And he was working all those things out. So here's Saul, and he doesn't realize that these things have been worked out without him knowing it. And it says in verse number 19, Saul said, I am the seer. Go up before me into the high place, for ye shall eat with me today, and tomorrow I will let thee go, and will tell thee all that is in thine heart. Now, I don't know. I mean, again, like I said, he was already told, and he said unto him, Behold, now there is in the city a man of God, and he's an honorable man. All that he saith cometh surely to pass. So now he just said, hey, I'm going to tell you all that's in your heart. I mean, you think about that. What if we had the ability this morning, if I said, all right, Chris, stand up. I'm going to say everything that's in your heart. There's probably some people who get up and walk out the back door like, he ain't going to do that to me. He ain't going to do that to me. But yet here Samuel said, I'm going to tell thee all that's in thine heart. And we're going to see that they commune together. And Brother Wayne, it never says it, but I wonder, the fact that he said he's going to tell you all that's in your heart, I wonder if he warned him, hey, you better watch. You better watch. He tells him later after he'd sinned, he said, when you were little in your own eyes. You better watch. It never dawned on him that he could be lifted up with pride. It never dawned on him. Someone that said, hey, your father's donkeys are missing, and he goes on a multiple day journey and runs out of food looking for them. And however far he was away, he's out of food, he's still got to go back. He was that obedient to his father, and it never dawned on him that he could be disobedient to God. But Samuel said, I'm going to tell you all that's in your heart. And so I'm curious, like I said, the Bible doesn't say, but I'm very curious if God tried to show him and tried to warn him when Samuel said, all that's in your heart, if Saul said, no, that's not me. No, that's not me. We know that the Bible says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And who can know it? And sometimes I don't think we're honest with ourselves. I don't think we're honest with ourselves to say, you know what? I'm saved, I've been born again, I've been forgiven, but there's still another side of me that I have to constantly fight and have to constantly pray about it and read and study and keep in subjection. And so in verse number 20, he says, and as for thine asses that were lost, here's Samuel, and he's appeasing his conscience 3 days ago, set not thy mind on them. For they are found. And here's where he shocks him, and on whom is all the desire of Israel. Well, Saul at least knew they were looking for a king. Is not it on thee and on all thy father's house? And Saul answered and said, am not I Benjamite? He said, what? Me? Not me. You must have this wrong. And again, like I said, he doesn't have the relationship with Samuel that he's going to have. But he did at least hear the servant say, everything he says comes to pass. If he says it, it's coming to pass. And so here he said, it's not on thee and on all thy father's house. And Saul realizes, wait a second, he just said, I'm going to be king. He just said that I'm going to be king. And he said, am not I a Benjamite, of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin? Wherefore then speakest thou so to me? Again, when you read that, there is humility in that. There is humility in that, and I think we should be humble. I think we should be humble people. I don't think we should be full of pride. I think when I say full of pride, I think you should take pride in your work. I think there should be confidence as a man. There should be confidence, like, hey, yes, you need something done. I have the ability. I can do that. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying when you're lifted up with pride, that's a whole nother animal. And yet here is Saul, and he's humble right here. But I also think, based off of what he does later, I think he's full of insecurities. And so when the weight of that comes on him, that Samuel's talking to him to be king. When the weight of that comes on him, he's like, oh, wait a second. I can't be king. I've not done this, and I don't have that, and I don't know this, and I'm just of the tribe of Benjamin, of the least of all the tribes, and my family's the least of the least. And he goes through all kinds of excuses. But the appropriate response would have been, if that's what God wants, show me how. Teach me how. You've been a judge, and you've been a judge over Israel, and you've done a great job. And if I'm going to be the first king, show me how. But that's not what he says. He says, no, not me. And so what happens next, and I'm gonna skip through a little bit here, we already know from the maidens that they were going to have this dinner, and Samuel had already told his servant, like, hey, we got someone special coming today, and I need you to set aside a portion for them. And so they go and they have this meal, and they bring Saul and the servant in, and they set them in the chief place. So apparently these 30 people that were bidden to this meal probably had a slight bit of insight over the rest of Israel that, hey, something special just happened here, and it's the son of Kish, Saul. He was the one that was brought in and set in this special place. And when you get down to verse number 25, it says, and when they were come down into the high place into the city, Samuel communed with Saul upon the top of the house. Now again, there are many times in the Bible where I wish there were more details. There are many times in the Bible where I'm like, man, I wish I knew what that conversation was. I think Brother Randy brought it up the other day, or someone brought it up the other day, about after Jesus was resurrected, and they were walking down the road, and he revealed it. He eventually revealed himself, but he basically gave them a whole history of Christ in the Old Testament. And yet, and you're like, man, I'd love to listen to that one on sermon audio. I would have loved to listen to that one over and over and over again, and just been able to go through these passages. And sometimes you're like, I don't know, I mean, is that a type of Christ right there? Is that what that is, or is it not? And some people say it is, and some people it's not. But if Jesus said hey, that was me right there, then that was him. But God didn't give us that. And so right here as well, God doesn't show us, but it says he communed with him on the top of the house. And so they're up on top of the house, and Samuel is communing with Saul, and they're establishing this relationship. And so early in the morning, in verse number 27, it says, and they were going down to the end of the city. Samuel said to Saul, bid the servant pass on before us. And he passed on, but stand thou still a while, that I may show thee the word of God. So again, I believe that Samuel explained to Saul his job as king. I believe that when Saul failed, Riley, I believe that he failed. You actually see it because Samuel tells Saul, you rejected the commandment. We look at it like, was it that bad? I mean, maybe, he's supposed to wait 7 days and he got a little impatient. It was the seventh day, but he got a little impatient. Was it really that bad? But Samuel says, you rejected the commandment of the Lord. And you're like, well, how did he know? These conversations, I believe that Samuel showed him things that are not written in the scriptures, that Samuel showed him things, and that he knew better, and he chose to disobey. And so you get to chapter 10, and Samuel takes that vial of oil and poured it upon his head and kissed him and said, is it not? Because the Lord hath anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance. So now here Samuel, he anoints him with oil, and he tells him that you are going to be king. And we know that they work it out where he's going to, at the end of chapter 10, he's going to come and he's going to call all Israel together, and then they're going to start, saying, okay, it's not this one, not this one, not this one, it is this one. And then they're going to keep narrowing it down until eventually they get to Saul. And actually at that time, he knows he's supposed to be king, and he knows the answer. Everyone else is eagerly anticipating the answer. And the two guys that know the answer, maybe three if he told his servant, but the three guys that knew the answer, Saul said, you know what, I think I'll just go hide amongst the stuff right here. But anyway, so now here is Samuel, and Samuel's like, look, Saul, I know how you are. So God is going to work it out. God is going to work it out so you cannot have any questions. And so he tells him, he said, this is how this is going to go. First, you're going to depart from me, and you're going to find two men by Rachel's sepulcher. And they're going to tell you that the asses which thou wentest to seek are found. And lo, thy father hath left the care of the asses, and sorroweth for you, saying, what shall I do for my son? And then he tells him, then you're going to go on, and there are going to be three men going to Bethel, going to God to Bethel. One carrying 3 kids, another carrying 3 loaves of bread, another carrying a bottle of wine. And then those men they're going to give him 2 loaves of bread. And then lastly, you're going to go to the hill of God, where the garrison of the Philistines, and it shall come to pass when thou art come thither to the city, thou shalt meet a company of prophets coming down from the high place, and they shall prophesy, and the Spirit of the Lord will come upon thee, and thou shalt prophesy. And verse 7 says, and let it be when these signs are coming to thee, that thou do as occasion serve thee, for God is with thee. And thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down unto thee to offer burnt offerings, and to sacrifice sacrifices of peace offerings. And right here, 7 days shalt thou tarry, till I come to thee and show thee what thou shalt do. So now here's Samuel, and again, like I said, he tells him this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and all these things are going to happen, and I read it earlier, all those things happened. But it's very important that we see that little, just a few words right there. It says, 7 days shalt thou tarry. Because there's another thing that's going to happen in just a short time period, a few years down the road, where he's supposed to tarry 7 days. And he tarries almost a full 7 days. You know, tomato. Is it day 7 when day 7 starts? Or is it day 7, have I tarried 7 days till the very end of the 7th day? Well, apparently God intended it to be the very end of the 7th day. Because we're going to see that Saul gets impatient, the people are fleeing, and the Philistines are ready to attack, and he's nervous, and he's struggling to make a decision, and he's waited on Samuel for 6 days, and the start of the 7th day, and the 7th day, Samuel still hadn't appeared, and so he decides, I'm just going to do this on my own. And as soon as he does it, in walks Samuel and said, what have you done? And so it's very important as we see these things. Sometimes God, when we have our Bible, it doesn't come highlighted. It doesn't come with big bold, it doesn't come with big bold letters. Some of y'all may have letters in red for the words of Christ, but you understand what I'm saying? It doesn't always come highlighted, and it's not always this huge thing. Sometimes it's just a little thing. It's just a little thing that God showed him, hey, I want you to wait 7 days. And then later, he's going to be without excuse because God said, hey, you could wait 7 days back then. But why couldn't you wait 7 days now? You could wait 7 days back then and be patient, but now you decided I'm going to do something on my own. And so in verse, let me see here. I'm pretty much done. In verse number 9, it says, it was so that when he had turned his back to go from Samuel, God gave him another heart. Now, when we see this right here, there's a couple things that we see, and it's very confusing because if you read the commentaries, and most people, and I tend to agree with them, we're going to talk in our terminology. Most people don't think Saul ever got saved. Most people don't think that Saul ever got born again. Did he get another heart? Yes. But did he ever fully submit himself to God, fully surrender himself to God, and come to God God's way? I don't believe he did. And so yes, he prophesied. A spirit came on him and he prophesied. But because we don't believe you can lose your salvation. And so we know that eventually that evil spirit comes from God. And he's a whole different person then. And so, but at this moment, God gives him another heart. And so God may have strengthened him and gave him the ability to understand and the ability to be the king. Because of his humility and because of his insecurities, God gave him another heart to say, hey, I have chosen you, and I have chosen you to be king, and I am going to give you the ability to be king. But because he gave him those abilities, doesn't mean Saul ever got born again. And so it's a shame to see that how Saul started out. And even though he was God's chosen king to start out, I don't believe that God necessarily wanted Saul to be king. I think it was probably God's plan to continue to allow Samuel to be the judge until a little shepherd boy that was growing up at this time, until he was old enough to be king. But the people said, no, we're going to have it, and we're going to have it now. And God said, fine, I'll give you what you want. I'm going to give you a king just like you. A king that doesn't have a heart for God. A king that doesn't have a heart for God. And so we'll finish next week. But God brought all those things to pass. Everything that Samuel said, that's what happened. And God brought all those things to pass and gave Saul that other heart to say, hey, I can do this. But then it became up to Saul to be obedient. And that's where he failed. Thank you.